Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 prakim. Rambam, Hilchos, Tumas, Meis, prakim, Yutches, Chai, Yutes, and Chaf. We will begin with Perek Yutches. The Perek will give us various scenarios in which we'll see that a person can serve as an oil to bring Tumah from one environment into another. We will also be learning a little bit in this chapter already how a keli can also bring Tumah into another environment. We're going to learn that at times only a cupboard can isolate itself from a house, allowing that which is in it not to become contaminated with Tumas oil from something else that's under the same roof in the house. And Perek Shmona Asar has 8 halachas. Chevra, these are unbelievable parakim that we are in right now. Bechlal, Tumas oil, or Bechlal, the dinim of Tara in many areas follows its own set of rules. And let us dive right in. Perek Shmona Asar, halacha aleph. Adam sheheil biyodei achas ala meis. Person is extending one of his hands over a mace. Veheil b'shniya ala kelim. Obviously, we're speaking about enough of the mace that halachically could impart Tumas oil. And the other hand is on top of a keli. Or the contact of the person on the mace is not through oil, hand over, but through touch. But veheil ala kelim, the person's other hand is over a keli. So the rule that we use regarding an oil, that an oil is only an oil if it has tefach by a tefach, and it's 1 tefach breath or more above the keli in our case. Only then I kalim to me. When I'm saying that there are unique systems of halacha, specifically by Tara, just to give a contrast, the kitzur for those of us who learned Masechta Shabbos, even in the beginning, whether it was Daf Gimel or Daf Daled, Daf in the beginning, we had that whole concept that a akira and a hanacha, benegea hoitzah Shabbos, is only if it's from makaim, the item that you picked up, and the item that you put down is only if it's from a place, on a place that's arba'a al arba'a tfachim. Remember that? 4 by 4 tfachim. And if not, the item was not considered stationary. You didn't make an akira, you didn't make a hanacha, and biblically you did not violate Shabbos. Now the Gemara there speaks about what about if someone, the whole Mishnah, if I place it in your hand, person's hand is, a tefach. A tefach, if it's opened by 2 tefachim, not 4 by 4 tefachim. So there, when it comes to Shabbos, we say that the hand of a person is ki'ilu arba al arba. I'm just giving a contrast. We don't say that over here by the dinim of Tuman Tara, that if it's the human hand, it's considered automatically chashuv. Absolutely not. It has to follow the law of a tefach by a tefach. Now let's continue how a person can extend Tumas oil. There are 2 houses, and in each house, guys, listen to what's going on over here. Each house only has a half a kazayis. In other words, not a single house has enough tumah in it for it to become tamei b'tumas oil. However, this genius, right, is extending his hands. One hand is in one house, the house, and the other hand is in the other house. This is mamish godly. You have to gavaldik. So then, listen to what this guy is doing. He combines both houses. What pshat he combines both houses? The pshat is that all of these 2 houses, both of these houses are considered one house. So it's not only that this person becomes tamei, because he is over a sum total of 1 kazayis. He brings the tumah, he connects the houses. Anything that's under the roof of either house becomes tamei. But if his hand, when it's open, doesn't amount to the size of a tefach by a tefach, how great is that? Halacha beis. Another case. Adam shehishkiv, a man is leaning over through the window. So in other words, you're in the house and there is a kazayas min ames, which is enough to impart tuma soil, right outside the window. And the windows don't have glasses in them. That's important because of that, then the whole window was stopped over. The window is just a hole in the wall. And you're leaning out and you happen to lean over the tumah. So what did we say? That a person not only becomes tameh because he was mahil al hameis, you bring the tumah into the other environment. Your feet are on the ground inside the room. So maybe it's a tumah labayis. Of course that you become tameh. Everything under the roof in that room also becomes tameh. The nitmer kol habayis. Now we're going to go into a greater concept. The greater concept is like this, is that when a person is laying down, say on your back, the height of the person's body, right, unless you're starving, is more than a tefach. By many of us, it's more than an am. I'm just kidding. In other words, there is a tefach in the hollow of the body. So we say, listen to this, a person is laying on the doorstep. The point that Rambam is trying to bring is that you are in two environments. So some of your body is inside the house. Some of your body is outside the house. And the part of you that's outside the house is over a kazais min ames. People are going to say, whoopa, but there isn't a tefach of empty space. Yes, there is. Because what part of you is the oil over the kazais, Aaron? Think about it. Let's say my chest. Even if there's a source of tumah right under my back, I know that there isn't a tefach of airspace, but there is, because we ignore my back. We ignore every part of my body until the top of my chest. That's a tefach. That's more than a tefach. So I am considered oil on the mace, and the other half of me is in the house. Yechap, what's going on? So everything in the house also becomes tummy. Because since a person is hollow, we view the person's body to be hollow, not after the cholent, before the cholent. I'm just kidding. That's the way halacha looks at a body. And the yesh b'goy v'tefach, if you're laying down, in other words, your waist size, right, is more than 3 tefachim, which means the diameter is more than a tefach. Keep and she'ila tuma olav. Oh, 1 second. What the Rambam is saying even more. What I said is simple. If you are on the tumah, let's go better. Someone put a kazayas on you. Listen to this, Aaron. Someone put a kazayas on top of you. So the tumah is on you. Now we began that oil can mean one of the three. Either one of the three. Either you are over the tumah, or the tumah is over you, or you and the tumah are under the same roof. When the tumah is over you, you are now a oil. You become contaminated because of oil, even though the tumah is on you. Now that the rest of your body is in the house, you understand? You bring it into the house. The kiv and shayla tumah, Allah, since tumah is on you, it's equal to you being on it. It's the same thing. And now that we established that one hand brings tumah into the other house, not just hand, any body part. Or maybe it's a tumah. If there was tumah in the house, so you're laying down, again, Aaron, you're in the house. That means that part of your body is under the roof that's giving you tumah. Your body is extended to the outside. If someone steps over you, so you brought the tumah to them. Now that we said whether you are over the tumah or whether the tumah is over you, well, it amounts to the same. It's amazing. Again, if the tumah is over you, it's as if you are over the tumah. And like we mentioned, this is important, that a person has only the negative. If you remember in Perek Yud Beis, and we're going to focus a lot both in the 18th chapter and God willing in the next chapter, about nuance in this rule that Adam and Kalim, on one hand, they are considered an oil to bring the tumah to something else underneath him, her, or them, but it doesn't stop the tumah from going up. So now we are applying that rule. You bring the tumah. Now you can argue someone stood over me. If someone stood over me, why don't I contain the tumah within me? Like we're saying, the body is like a hollow with oil. The answer is that's the whole point, that an Adam and a Keli, they don't stop the tumah from going up. So the tumah is coming from the top of the part of me that's in the house. And then the tumah is going to go up from all of me, including the part of me that's out of the house. And this Nabach innocent guy that stood over me will become Tamei. Halacha 3. Give me just an example. People are carrying a bier, carrying a corpse, and they're walking under a achsadra. Guys, an achsadra is a roofed area that's not fully walled. It was very common that when people right adjacent to their home, that means when they would open up the door to go outside, a certain area, I forgot the word now in English, you have they would have an achsadra. Not a trellis area, maybe it's a trellis area. Many people have it here in LA. It's like an awning. Okay, there you go. You have an awning. Now, what's the issue? The issue is like this, guys, that if the door in the house is open, this is not this chapter, that's simple. If people that are carrying a mace are going to walk under the awning, we just said that a person extends the tomb of the mace. If they are under the awning, then what happens? That anything under the awning becomes tummy. If the door of the house is open, and the lintel goes adjacent to the awning, then it brings it into the house. So what would normally happen is that when we are sitting in a house and we're watching a levaya and people are coming by, and naturally, especially if it's very hot or if it's raining, people just try to walk under the awning, you right away try to close the door. That's what happens. So they close the door to prevent it from entering. Hey, give echad mehem hadeles. Someone went ahead and closed the door. Now, these doors, unlike our doors, and when you close them, they're closed. These doors, the doors of the times of Chazal, you can imagine. So one of the things that they had is that they had these little pegs that they would stick in the ground, and that is what he's calling here a mafteach. The key is that they had these things which kept the door closed. Why did they want the door to remain closed? Because they should leave mabayis. Or if they didn't have such a lock or key or peg or latch, whatever they used, they had a person staying there, leaning on the door. Whether the guy is inside the house, whether there's someone else outside the house, he wanted to make sure the door is closed. So what we do is that person's leaning on the door is discounted. The latch, the keli's leaning on the door is discounted. What you need to know is whether you would not have that latch, whether you would not have that person leaning, would the door remain closed? Then habai is tohar, because the closed doors choitzeitz, not allowing the tumah to enter. But the imlav habai is tamei. Why? Well, the door is closed. Oh, because if the door can only remain closed, either because of this type of peg, which has a din of a keli, or because of a person leaning on it, you're really the one making the door stay closed. And now another application of this rule in Perek Yud Beis, that an Adam and a Keli, they create an oil to be maybe, that's a chumrah, but they cannot be used to be chaytzeitz. For Adam and Keli, another application. And now we're moving on to a Tanu. Now, what we're going to have now, it's going to be so amazing. Both now and in the next chapter, there's different types of kalim. There will be times that when there is an oil in an oil, the simple tent, there's a tent in your house. Do we say that if there's tumah under the tent, it only is contained under the tent? We don't say that. We say that an oil in an oil doesn't prevent the tumah to going into the greater oil. Now, what happens with a keli in the oil? A big closet. What happens with a tanur? We're going to see that they don't all travel on the same road. The first din is going to be a tanur. Now, a tanur that we are talking about, at least that's the way we will learn pshat, is not only if it's built or connected into the ground, even if it's only resting on the ground. Halachically, as he writes here, just to give a intro to these halachas, that Rambam does not, it's considered as a separate entity, but it's not considered like a keli in a house. Aaron, if we would have viewed this oven as a keli, then it would have been a lot more. It would not block the tumah as much as a tanur does. Now, don't forget something else, guys. Even if we consider the tanur another entity, it's not part of the bigger house. If there's an opening of a tefach by a tefach, even two doors, two houses, if there's such an opening, then the tumah goes from one environment into the other. So the question here will be, where is the opening to the tanur? If there's an oven, and the opening to the oven, not only if it's facing up, if it's facing to the side, door, that's a problem. However, here, let's now read it inside. The tanur is in the house. Aber what's the advantage? The einoi kemura lachutz. The einoi kemura, different types of doors. This is some sort of dome-shaped opening. Point is that the opening into the oven was extending to outside the house, which is a good thing. Which means that if there is tumah in there, let me just say these words because we're going to have this in this chapter and the next chapter. Even if something is in the house and it's contained, since the only way of removing it, if the only way of removing it is taking it out of this closet into the room outside the house, that's called soif tuma lotzes. Eventually, the tumah is going to have to travel into the larger house. It's already coming. All of the dinim that we're going to have, many dinim, this chapter, next chapter, of different kalim, now it's a tanur. See, once the opening is to outside the house, that's a good thing. Because if you would like to remove the tumah, you don't have to remove it in the house. It can go directly to outside the house. Oh, that's the key here. Now let's go from all different angles. So first of all, let's continue with people carrying a corpse and they're walking over that opening. And like we mentioned in the beginning of this chapter, it doesn't only mean, Aaron, that the mace went over the opening. I'm sure people would be cautious. But if people didn't learn this Rambam, but they don't chap, is that even if the mace, my friends, is not going over the opening to the oven, but if I'm carrying it and I extend the oil, if my hand, if it's a tefach, goes over the opening, that also means the tumah went over it. Now we want to know if that means the tumah went in it. And if it went in it, did it go in the house? Let's see, how much does it extend? Because since it went over the opening, that's mamish, go back to the beginning of Halacha Aleph. So you have an Adam that's over a mace. Or if I'm carrying a mace, the mace is over me. It's all the same thing. Then if my hand or any part of me went over the opening, everything in the tanur is tummy. The advantage, the unique tanur is not like an oil, not like a keli, which is more problematic. A tanur is good, contains. And therefore, the bias is tahar. If the tanur would have been not resting on the ground, crazy halachas. As we'll see later, if there would be an opening from the tanur going into the house, it would change. Tanur is laying on the ground, no opening into the house. Even when the tumah goes in it, it doesn't contaminate the house. Now let's go into a migdal. Now a migdal means a closet. Now it's important to remember, going back to Perek Yud Beis, you have to differentiate between two types of kelim. A keli that it becomes tummy, with the rules that we learned over there. And then you have kelim, for example, any keli that's haba b'mida. Haba b'mida means it's so large, in English it's called oversized. What's the definition? Any keli that could contain 40 sav liquid, that keli is meant to remain stationary. And a keli that's meant to remain stationary does not become tummy, which is very important because we learned another rule yesterday, Shabbos, and a little bit on Friday. If something becomes tummy, it cannot stop tumah from traveling. So that will be key. Now, even though we're speaking about a migdal haba b'mida, so this does not become tummy, Aaron. But again, the issue is that if something is in a house, just because the tumah is in it, it doesn't always mean that the tumah will be contained in it because of this concept of soif tuma lotzes. Now, in the first case is, you have to chap this, shuhu omed b'teicha pesach. Omed b'teicha pesach means that it's mamish in the doorway. Now, that's good and bad. Let me tell you the good. I'm speaking a lot by heart, but once we get these rules, we're gonna fly through the rest. Hopefully, it takes a while to chap. If something is blocking the doorway, what happens if there's tumah in the house, not in this closet? Since that tumah at some point is going to be buried, and you're going to take it through the door, so you're going to have to take it through the space where this closet is. even though there is no opening from the closet into the house. It's as if the tumah is in it because it's going to travel through it. Unlike if this would have been in the house. Now I know that an oil is considered part of the greater oil. By a keli, we have to know which kelim. There's so many little details. This type of large closet will separate itself from the rest of the house. But again, if it's in the doorway, so like this. If tumas in the migdal, since this oversized keli is not tummy, so it's choitzeitz mepnei tuma. Even though this keli, my friend, is under the roof in the house, but it doesn't allow the tuma in it to go to the house. The house, but whatever's in this, this migdal is like a standalone house. Tummy, by start. But what happens if tumah by is even that which is in it is tummy? People say, how can that be? Remember, I was trying to chop. Wait a second. There's no opening of this closet in the house. The opening goes to the outside. The vart is that since, like we said, the tumah in the house will be taken out of the doorway. If something is blocking the doorway, so halacha says it's as if it's traveling through the closet now to leave the doorway. Even though in reality, you're not going to leave the closet there, you're going to take the closet away. It doesn't help. Since it has to travel through this space, it's as if it's already in it. It's inserted in the opening of the house. The derech hatumah says, and the Rambam adds, and we don't go in the opposite direction. Now, we don't say that you're going to bring the tumah in it, as we'll have many applications of that. Remember that derech hatumah says, be'ein darko liikanos. Now, whoever has a chayenu, I know that there's so many different ways of learning this Rambam. If I'm making a mistake, I apologize to the Olam. I read it a few times, a little bit of Yigiyah. My understanding is the following. Muchni, like he says here, some people touch its wheels. Let's go that it's a drawer. It's a gewaldige thing. So you have this big closet. We just said, Aaron, that this type of oversized closet, in principle, it keeps the tumah in it. What happens if there's a drawer and the tumah is in the drawer and some genius opened the drawer and the open part of the drawer in which there is tumah is under the ceiling in the house? Do we say, it's open? Or do we say that if the opening is not a tefach by a tefach, it's contained in the closet? And therefore, if the closet, you understand, let's read it inside. If the drawer of this closet is extended backwards, why is he saying backwards? Because he's speaking about a closet that is placed in the doorway. And the point we're trying to make is that the drawer extended backwards means it's extended in the house. And it's open. It's open to under the roof, but less than a tefach, that's key. And this is a drawer that cannot be viewed as another utensil because it cannot be removed from the closet. Because if this drawer would not be considered part of the closet, like we mentioned, any small keli is mekabel tumah, it cannot stop the tumah. Now, the chiddush here is that the tumah that's in this drawer is not in the part of the drawer that's still in the closet. The tumah that's in there is mamish physically under the rafters, the ceiling of the house. The bayis star, because the drawer is not open, the tefach by a tefach. We view the tumah to be in the closet. How beautiful! Now, even though the drawer is extending out, means the drawer is not closed. Now this is key. If the drawer would be removable, if you can separate the drawer like today's drawers, that changes the halacha. Because then we will view the tumah not to be in the closet. If the tumah is in the drawer, who cares? I'll tell you, Nachamal, that's why we began in that we're speaking about migdal habab mida. That's key. The habab mida means only an oversized keli that does not become tameh could at least sometimes be chaytzeitz or contain the tumah within it. Here, it's not removable. And the other upside is it's not extending a tefach. But there's another nuance. The other nuance is how much height do you have in the drawer? Because even though there isn't a physical covering on that extended open part of the drawer, we're saying since it's not a tefach by a tefach, the tumah stays contained in there. But you know when we can say that? if the height of the drawer is at least a tefach. Because if the height of the drawer is less than a tefach, then I don't care that the drawer is in the closet. Then boikas v'oilas, we keep on learning. But if you don't have the height of a tefach, even though the drawer is considered part of the closet, so what? But it's not in the drawer. It's tumah retzutza. It's flush tumah. And then everything in the house is tameh. Now, guys, we are in the middle of Dalet. We have to move quicker, but this is so geschmack when you chap what the Rambam is saying. Now we're saying migdal, ki hababa midah, but not that the migdal is in the doorway. Now the migdal is inside the house. That's a huge difference. Because something in it, even when the migdal is closed, it's called soif tuma lotzes. How will you get this tuma out of the house? At some point, you're going to have to open up the closet and take it through the house. Whether the tuma is in it, or whether the tuma is in a drawer of it. He says even more. Forget about a drawer. See, a drawer and it is the same. So he's giving an example of you having a standalone box. So it's in a box in the closet. Even though the closet is closed, you don't have an opening of a tefach. Already the house is tamei. Why, guys? Remember the rules. Soif tuma lotzes. In the beginning of halacha dalid, the closet was in the doorway, and the doors through which you bring in or take out of the closet is facing the outside. That's the difference. Here, it's all in the house. And more, now, tuma babayis, one thing is good. If there's tuma in the house, since it's an oversized migdal, so it's not considered a keli, you understand? So whatever is in it, if the closet is closed, it's tahar. Because the tuma in the house, when you will remove it, won't be put in the closet, taken out of the closet. Why would anyone bring the tumah in the closet? Obviously, guys, if there isn't a pesach tefach, if some genius opened up the doors to the closet, that's a whole different din. Even if we consider this migdal a different room, so what? The tumah will go in it. How great. Halacha kelim. Now let's go further. You have this migdal, you have this huge closet. What happens if there are kalim underneath it? Kalim should be in the middle of or if this closet is adjacent to a wall and you have kalim in between it and the wall, or if this closet is very tall, it almost goes to the ceiling, and you put something on top of it between it and the koidos, meaning the ceiling. So here, this is what we say, if there is a poiseach tefach, the tuma is Aaron in the house. If that opening is the size of a tefach, yes, we consider it another room, but it's open to the bias with a tefach. So they become tamei. If the area, let's say under the closet, is less than a tefach, the tuma in the house doesn't go to under the closet. In other words, what the Rambam is saying is that we make believe, this is a concept that we have when it comes to other dinim that we don't say it. Guys, I want to make a very important point. People have a klutz kasha. Didn't we learn lavud? We learn lavud. You know what lavud means? Lavud means when two things are near each other, if it's less than 3 tfachim, it's as if it's closed. We don't apply lavud. Another example, other than the one we spoke about, Hoitzah Shabbos. These dinim follow different rules. That's the beauty. It's like a whole different part of Torah. It's all one Torah. There's no lavud here. Good. So we view as if the rafters of the house go down. Going down means it isolates the area over the closet, under a closet, or in between the wall, and it's a different area. And therefore, if there isn't a Pesach Tefach, Tuma will not travel. Halacha 6. If there's Tuma, not the case until now was the Tuma was Babayis. They want to know whether the Tuma of the house goes to under. Now it's Pum Fakeh. The source of Tuma is under this closet, between it and the ground, or on top, between it and the roof, or between it and the wall. Listen to this. The house will become tamei. Now, 1 second. Why will the house become tamei? soif tuma latzes. See, it works. In other words, the tuma will eventually leave, be buried. So remember that klal. Just like we said before, if the tuma is in the closet itself, if the closet is in the house becomes tamei. This is no different. Now we are in the middle of a new case. This closet that's oversized is not indoors; it's outdoors. The tuma betoichoi, and there's a source of tuma in it. So kalim sheba ovyoi, if it's a closet with thick walls, and somehow there's a keli, a needle is a keli. If someone inserted a needle in the walls themselves, they don't become tamei. How great is that? Or if there's a source of tuma in the thickness of the walls, the kalim in it remain tar. We don't consider it the same. The walls themselves, if it's shaykh to have something in it, they are isolated from, not connected to the hollow in the closet. Halacha 7. Right. Kol shipuye oyholim k'oyal. We keep on speaking about an oil, that an oil, to be an oil, it has to be a tefach above the ground. Now, there are certain types of roofs like we are familiar with. A proper roof, a proper house. You have a roof and you have walls. Then you have all different types of tent structures. Some of them, many tents actually, don't have a flat roof. They have a slanted roof. Now, it's shaykh that it's so slanted that when you come to the periphery of the oil, it's mamish, just a bit above the ground. There could be an area at the edges of the oil where you don't have a tefach. The first halacha is it doesn't matter. Since the ikir of the oil is over the ground, all of the oil is considered an oil. Halacha 7. Kol shipuye oyholim koyolim. Slanted walls that are not walls. I'm sorry, a slanted oil. If we don't consider it a wall, we consider it a covering. Ketzah, all of it. Oil shushayfeyam v'yoydet. But you know how much does it slant at the color? Even only a etzba off the ground. Guys, tefach, 4 etzbas. It's only 1 etzba. So no matter if the tumah is under the tent, kalim under the shipua, tamei. Same thing in the opposite. If the tumah is under the shipua, even though right above it you don't have the tefach, we consider it a tefach. The kalim and the oil are tamei. Weiter. Now you have to mamish halt cup, break your head. So the way many understand, I know we're middle of halacha, and now we're going mi'inyan le'inyan. At kan tumas oil. Now, if you remember a keli that becomes tamei from a mace, that was the big chiddush. If you didn't learn this, you say, wow. Normally, tuma goes down a notch. But we learned, no. By tumas mace, if the tumas mace contaminated the keli, of course, is tamei mace. But if the keli touches an adam, the adam is also tamei tumas shiva. So now it must be that Rambam is speaking about how there was tuma under this tent, and now the tuma was removed. We also learned like this, guys, if this would have been a bona fide house, then the house itself never becomes tamei. But there are certain materials, if they are used for a covering, as we learned before, they themselves become tamei. That's the case. It must be. So, hatuma b'toich hashipua. B'toich doesn't mean not anymore, Rabbi Chaim. The tuma was there, and you removed it. And again, he's reminding us that if the covering was made out of linen or wool or leather, that material is tamei. Now, what was its tuma? Because it was an oil. That's called first contact, which is enough. And don't think that if I touch it, I'm only tuma serep. No. Here, if I touch it, I become tuma shiva. So now that I'm adding a nuance to that, when do we say that mace, remember halal cherev, mace, keli, adam, the adam becomes tamei tuma shiva if it's a sword, I don't matter which part of the sword. But if the keli is an oil, halachically, we separate the inner part of the oil, the one that was over the mace, versus the opposite side of the oil. It doesn't have that much power. So, since the mace was under it, I'm touching that location. Guys, if the mace is there, none of this makes sense. It must be the mace was removed. Now I'm tamei tuma shiva because of the halachis of halal cherev. However, listen to this beauty, but if someone touches the shipua ma'achayra, here we don't say halal cherev, not even for truma and kachim. The person is only tuma seref. And by the way, the same thing is the opposite. What happens if the mace was over the oil? It was over the tent. So the tent had an igia betuma. Halal cheret. No, by an oil, only if someone later touches the outer part, the side where the tuma touched, and not the inner. They'll both become tummy, but a big difference. If you touch the inner, then it's the normal rule. The tent is you become a rish. That means you only tuma serev. And nasa shifuma hanegeh b'shum achorev tuma serev. But if nasa shivua ma'achorev, but why? 1 second he teaches nasa shivua ma'achorev ki'ilu hu keli shenaga ba'oyo. And if you remember, mace, keli, Adam keli is the farthest it can travel. But mace keli, no. The second keli is tuma serev. We view that it's the same material. No, halachically we separated. And this now is the opposite, the other direction. If the tuma was on top of the shipur, so now, and then it was removed. Because of halal cherav. It's called mace, keli, adam. But now let's put it together. It's going to blow your minds. If there is a half a kezayis under the tent and a half a kezayis above it, how did we begin the chapter today, Perek Shmona Asar? That an oil, the Rambam's example in Halacha Aleph today was the Adam becomes the oil. That oil becomes tummy. Because this side and that side. But not a single side had direct contact with the full kezayis. So you don't say halal charav, even though the oil combined it. But the tziruf of the oil is only for itself. Final halacha, we should have started a bit earlier, because the next chapter is also the same, amazing. It's amazing. If you have this tent, in halacha zayin, it was that it came down near the ground, even just an etzba above the ground. Now we're speaking about a type of tent that the oil comes all the way down and it actually travels on the ground. It lays on the ground. That's considered something on the ground, even though it's all connected. And therefore, the tumatachas cannot for oil, if there's something directly under it, on which part, on the one that's laying on the ground or on top of that kanav, we don't say that if you are under the oil, you become tamei. No. It's as if it's not there. What's the rule? That if there's tumah and if there's something within a tefach, it's not there. But it doesn't spread to the sides. Mazel tov. Now, the 19th chapter, we're moving on more about whether there is a keli in the oil, how much of a separated environment do we consider that? And I think the biggest chiddush in the 19th chapter, Dafke, in the first halacha that everyone is speaking about, is that if you remember, we learned that a keli haba b'mida, we mentioned this in the last chapter, since the keli does not become tummy because it's very large, oversized, that means it could contain 40 saw of water or more. So the general rule is a keli that's not a keli, because it's oversized, is chaytzes. Now the Rambam is going to tell us, no, nicht den ganzen. So if something is in this oversized keli, and I know that we learned in Perek Yud Beis, the main rules, it's chaytzes. Chaytzes means that if something is over another part of the covering, it's not tummy. Unlike, let's say, an adam or a real keli that's over tuma. Remember, we learned Navy, the Eino Chaytzes. What is Eino Chaytzes? Whoever sing this, let's say this is the tuma, my great coffee over here, and this is an adam. So first of all, the adam has the power that it can make the watch tummy because it's Navy. Adam or keli is not chaytzitz. We learned crazy that even if there's something else here, not directly over it, if there would not have been anything, only something that's directly over the tumah becomes tummy. An oil of an adam or a keli ain't a chaytzitz, it makes it worse. It means that even if something else is over the side of the tumah, but over the oil, it will become tummy. It's maybe to above. An oversized keli that the Rambam said before is chaytzitz doesn't mean chaytzitz. It only means that it's chaytzitz. It doesn't allow something that's not directly over the tumah to become tumah. But if something is over the keli hababa mida, directly over the tuma, it will become tummy. That will be the ikir. That will be like the nuance of this chapter, speaking about the status of kelim. We had in the previous chapter more about Adam. Now it's about a keli inside a bais. Here we're going to have the rule that an oil in an oil doesn't prevent the tumah from going into the greater oil, and many other such nuances. Pedikisha also, that's 6 halachas, but you see how quantity and quality are two different worlds, small but huge. All right. Halacha al kaveres. Now, what's the kaveres? So again, chever. We're going to follow. I mean, he did such a good job here in the Chayenu, but we're picking and choosing. There's so many different ways of learning these halachas. And Rambam, you have to know how to learn the Mishnayos. We're speaking about a basket, beehive like keli. A beehive is not square, just the way they used to make baskets. Here we'll understand that this kaveres is hababa mida. It won't work. That means they used to make huge such baskets, which is advantageous because again, a keli is not choitzes, because it becomes tummy, like a adam. That was the logic. And like we said, how much tummy that if there's tumah under me, not only am I not choitzes, but all of me is Thomas mace, and anything over me is as if it's over the mace. Keli ababa mida is choitzes, but like we said, only for the sides. So that's the case here. It's a kaveres. We're going to learn this to mean a keli hababa mida. And it's muteles va'aretz, it's laying on the ground. Now, whoever learned good the last chapter, here again, we're going to have this nuance. Is it in the house or is it at the doorway of the house? That's key. And the opening of the scali is facing out. And the kazayis min ameis nosun tachteha. You have a kazayis of a mace that's placed underneath it or on top of it, in the part of it that's outside the house. The maila of the keli being oversized, the tumah is over it or under it, is that it is choitzitz for the tumah to go to the sides. But it's not matzel. If there's something in this keli directly over or directly under the kazayis, it will become tummy. That's the rule. Kol shu neged hazayis petachtea oy begavo tamei. However, the inside of the keli is not tamei. Now let me make just a contrast. If this would not have been an oversized keli, it would have been on a small box. Cannot contain 40 saw. Since a keli becomes tamei, so what happens is it's not choitzitz at all. So the mace that's on top of it is as if it's in it. Any other person or keli that's in the box will become tummy. Not here. But the chiddush is that you can't say that it completely protects the tumah because the tumah does go down or does go up. So you have a mitzias of something being in the box. Now people ask, if there's something in the box that becomes tummy, what about halal cheref? So if you remember, we learned that the keli that had contact with the mace can only impart tumah through negiyah, not through oil. So taka, nothing in the box, if it doesn't touch the keli, will become tumah. Chutz mikeli shu keneged tumah ba'istor. Guys, that's the big thing of this chapter. Now, let's go in the other direction. If the tumah was in the house, ein tumah yalabayis. Again, a chiddush. If, my friends, if this would have been, what did we learn in the previous chapter? That when you have a keli on a doorway, what do we say? We say that since the only way the tumah would soifa tumah lotzes, so it's going to go through the keli. We spoke there about the closet. Even though the opening of the closet is to the outside, everything in the closet becomes tummy. We don't say this by the kaveres. Aval kelim shebetoicha tachtel oy al gabon will be tohoidim. Gewaldig. No, it's matzel. It's matzel that only the tumah the buys. Kalim in it, kalim under it, kalim on top of it, meaning, guys, kalim on top of it outside the house. Kalim are outside the house, because if the kalim are inside the house, they're in the house. Okay. Hoisa tum betrechen, after tum is inside of it, hakol tummy. Hakol tummy. Koil shababayis. Why kol shababayis? Now, guys, even if the tumah in the kaveres is in the part that's outside the house, doesn't matter. It's under this, it's inside of it, which means that we're going to now halachically consider the kaveres, the inner part of, like an oil. So there's tuma in it. And the tuma in it goes to anywhere in it. Some of it is in the house.
Inside the kaveris, everything in the kaveris is tummy.
Sure, not only everything in it, but since some of this kaveris is in the house, and oil inside an oil doesn't contain the tuma, even if the opening is not the inside the house, there's no poisayach tefach, that's gewaldig, so everything in the house becomes tummy. And once everything in it is tummy, and everything that's in the house is tummy, so and everything that's outside of it over. Something is over it outside. Because once there's tuma in it, it goes up. The chol shal gaba. The chol kenua ikomen shebiyanu.
Did we just say the opposite in the beginning?
No, we did not. Before that, we were speaking about the kazayis that's under it or over it outside the house.
So this is under it inside the house.
This is in it inside the house. This is in it, even though it could be in the part that's outside the house, but it's in it.
Yeah, it was under it before. Oh, under the kaver.
Under the kaver is outside the house. No, that's good. So it's since even though the part is that the part, the mace that's outside the house, if something would be in the kaveras over it, it would become tummy. But it doesn't allow it to go to the sides. That's the word. Now, if this kaveras has underneath it a tefach and the tumah is underneath it, now again, hakol tamei. Why is that? Because I have a think. The tumah underneath it, since there is a tefach between the tumah and the outer part of the lower kaveres, that's called an oil. So this kaveres is going in the house. We're viewing this as an oil. An oil in an oil is not matzah. So even though it does not allow the tumah to spread inside of it, unless you are above it, but everything in the house becomes tumah. Means even if the tumah is outside the house, under this kaveres, but there's a tefach space, so then this becomes the oil. This goes in the house. Then it goes to the wall. Then everything in the house is tumah. Everything directly above it, we'll see again, is tummy. He's not taking that away, but inside is tummy. That means anything under the oil of the house. Because again, that's the beginning of this chapter, that even when a keli is chaytzeis, it only means it doesn't allow for the tumah to go to his sides. Now again, hakol tamei, right? Again, the same case. It's a tefach. I don't care if it's a tefach over the ground. So what? Because the tumah is in it. Why? Because an oil in an oil is not mafsik. Because since it becomes tamei, that means if something, guys, is outside the house underneath it, it's also going to become tamei. V'chol shal gaba. Sha'kelim oy ha'adam shenasu oil ala tumah. Oy she'oisa tumah al gabeim. What did we learn? There, it does go to the sides. Once they become, you understand? When do we give this the status, my friends, of like an oil of a keli? It has to have a din of a keli. You have to begin with it being a keli, which means, what does define a keli? Bismanshi kli. Kli means not broken. And umichul cheles, it's hollowed inside of it. If it broke and you fixed it like a yeshiva bacher, this is very significant. If I fix a keli, I can make it into a new keli. If what I did, without getting to the details, we're going to learn this in Hilchos Kelim. If I simply fix it by stuffing up the hole with straw, it's a flimsy fix, then it's still considered a holy, not kedusha holy, a falechet. That's not called a keli. That will be better. That will be better, because if it's not a keli allows all of this. Then it stops. Shahadain a keli, or if it's not that it got broken and you did a flimsy fixing, shahoisa afutza, that you filled it up so much that you don't have now a halal tefach. Now, guys, I want you to know the nuances. We're speaking about a kaveres. Why am I saying that? Because by a migdal, we don't always view it that way. So what if a keli is filled? Like if you have a closet and you fill it up with clothing. Lav dafka, I'm saying lav dafka, I'm not sure, but I that's different. This type of kaveres, it's a very flimsy keli. It's like a basket like. If this is filled up currently, now it's viewed that there's no tafach in it. I
view a person as like a tefach.
And very good. That's when Aaron just made my point. No, it's don't, when you have to be careful, just the chap is don't compare cases to cases. You have a din of a tanur, and you have a din of a keli, you have a din of a kaveres, and everyone is meduik. The Chazal didn't give examples stam. They gave different examples because there are different subcategories. The point that Aaron is making is by an Adam, even though the body is filled, we do consider the hollow in the body to be a hollow. I think that's by a keli. I think it's because it's a very flimsy utensil. It's like a basket. It's weak. So if it's stopped, filled up with something, then it's not a halal tefach. Ela tuma. Now everything changes. Everything is rational. Once you accept this, everything makes sense. And he's going to give all the scenarios. So if it's above the ground, the tefach, that's great. You know what's great? Guys, let's go back to my house. You have tum in the house. If someone goes over the covering, they won't become tummy. Even if they're going directly over it. That's called chaytzeitz. So if there's tumah under it, a tefach, the tumah abayis, and the abayis will draw tameim. So if there's tumah again, if there's tumah under it, under the part, or if there's tumah under the house, everything under it will become tummy because it's one oil. You understand? Why? Because even though the area under it, you can consider it to be another environment, but there's a tefach opening. It's like one environment to the other. But anything in it or anything that will be tar, mamish, everything over will be tar. The place you oil shall eat, so that's a bona fide chatzitza. If the tum again is inside this, we're speaking about this non-keli, then ein time elotecha, which is also great. Now, people ask a question. Didn't we learn in the last chapter that when you have the closet that's inside the house, soif tumalotzes? I don't know why we don't say it here, but we don't say it. I'm saying if it's in this, we don't say soif tumalotzes. Now, I'm just giving you the words. All of the commentators are schwitzing. So they say that this, I'm saying the words, this is as if it's buried in the ground. And if something that's considered kavura, ba'aretz, ba'adama, we don't say soif tumalotzes. Soif tumalotzes is if something is in a keli, in a closet. You know what? Maybe because you're going to bury this with the tumah in it. You're not going to remove it from. Could be. Because it's a cheap keli. It's din of a kaveres. Or so then it doesn't allow the tumah to go down. Only connect the alrekia tamei. Not tumah tzutza. We don't say it goes underneath it. It's gavaldik. It's a proper. If someone puts a piece of tumah on the roof of a house, it doesn't go down, even though there isn't a tefach. No. It's a separate environment. We're speaking all about this damaged non-keli kaveres. So if it's underground and it's opening instead of outside, and the kazais manames is nasun tachtel. But you know what tachtel means? Outside. If you have to get that. So take connect the other time tummy. Only and what not? Not up. It stops it. If the tumah is on top of it, only connected al rekia tumah. Like it doesn't go in it and in the house, as we learned before. Now hold on. It's a bit like kaveres hamutelas ba'aretz. Kaveres that's not broken. Back to the normal kaveres. However, b'toicha Pesach, remember that the b'toicha Pesach, that was the beginning of the last chapter. So it's in the doorway, and however, it's opening is to the inside. We're speaking about the chaveres that sholim and chalula, and the kazais v'nameis nasum tachteha, oy al gaba. But guys, of course, and that is outside the house. Kol shuhu keneged hazayis b'tachte al gaba tamei. This is similar to the halacha aleph, that only if it's directly over or under it, But anything else that's in the ear space in the kaveres is tahar. Chutz mekeneged atuma. So far that pia lefnim, right, or pia lachutz, so far is the same. But Rabbi Star, where do they differ? If the tuma is inside of it. Now here it's different. Why is it different over here? Since it's open Aaron to the inside of the house, right? So we're going to say that the ear, it's part of the house. There, or if the tuma is in the house, that's where it differs from halacha aleph. Hakol tamei, it's one oil with the house. Let's go back. If this kaveres is above the ground of tefach and the tuma is underneath it, or the tuma is inside of it, or if the tuma is on top of it. Guys, whenever you read the word on top, remember one thing: outside of the house. Because if it's inside the house, it's under the oil of the house. Oy babayis hakol tamei kol shababayis the kol shetachtel. Why? Like we mentioned, because since this kaveres is pia lefnim, she babayis koyel echad. The chol she'al gaba of this kaveres, even outside the house, the chol she'betechatame shakeli maybe a satuma ve'eno chaytzitz. Okay,
I know that like one entity too.
Yeah. Now there's another nuance. If this is a keli hababa mida, we have to know: are we speaking about a smaller kaveres or even in the kaveres hababa mida? But if, like we learned before, if this is no longer a keli, either because it got broken and the person who fixed it halachically did not fix it, he only stuffed it up, he plugged it up with straw, or even if it didn't break, but you filled up this type of kaveres, you filled it up a futza, fashed up with schoida, and so now it's not like what did we mention? That's not a keli. So let's go right. If it was above the ground, the tefach and tumas underneath it, or tumas in the bayis, oy betoicha. Hakoil tamei. Ah, see another thing. Avremel, if pia lachutz, then we said inside is not. But since vaited, even though it's not a keli, if it's opened up to the inside of the house, it's part of the inside of the house. That's why hakol tamei. Chutz. What does al gaba means? Al gaba outside the house. Because since it is chaytzeitz, so something that goes on top of the part of it that's outside the house, even though it is tamei, it's not a keli to say, it's maybe the eno chaytzeitz. It is chaytzeitz. Choysa tumal gaba. Again, gaba always means outside the house. So again, only connected with alakia tamei. But since it's broken, does not become tamei in the inside. Avotechator, vetachtel. Now, if it would become tamei, what would happen, guys? If it becomes tamei, since it goes into the house and it's open to the house, then everything in the house would be tamei. But it's not a keli. So v'tachtev abayis kol mashem toy v'tnei shehi ena keli, comma, and therefore it's chaytzetzes. If it's not the tefach, if it's laying on the ground, and the mouth is again still halacha basis where the mouth is to the inside of the house, and the kazais when the mace is nasum tachtehom. How great is that? It stops it. Kenegdei anotohem tamei. In other words, the house is not tamei; it's chaytzeitz. Chaysal gaba kenegdei ad l'rakia tamei. All of this is when the tumah was under it or over it outside the house. Now, if the tumah was within it, oy babayis, then babayis tamei. And here again, the word will be is that since it's pia to the inside of the house, even though it's not a keli, it's one with the house. It's filling up the entire house. And the opening of this kaveres is to the roof, to the ceiling. Guys, we had this in the last chapter. You don't have peseach tefach and the tumas in it. Still, habayis tamei. Ooh, bomba. I'll tell you why. Because soif tuma says. Tuma bayis kol shechator, because there isn't a peseach tefach. Shederach tuma says that habayis and pachus tefach vein darkali kanes. Ha. Bayis ben choisoy medes. Same concept will be. If it's mutal tzida, the point is that its opening is near facing the wall. If it's less than a tefach, it's all the same concept. Tuma in it will go to the house. Soif Tuma Lotzes. Tuma in the house doesn't go inside of it. Or if you have two kaveres and one pile on top of the other. Point is that the opening of the top one is less than a tefach. The Tuma does not go in it. But if it's in the doorway, not inside the house, but in the doorway, and it's facing up, why? I'll tell you. Because why would the house become Tana Yidin? Because Soif Tumalatzes. The moment the opening, part of the opening is to the outside of the house, Soif Tumalatzes is only when it must go in the house. Here it can be taken outside. But what about the other direction? That's already connected to what we learned in the beginning of last chapter, because if something is in the doorway, my friends, and if there's tum in the house, Aaron, how are you taking it out of the house? You're going through the doorway. You're going through the doorway, so it's as if you went through this kaveres. We have to start davening at 8. Kaveres chalula. In other words, now, guys, one thing I can tell you, halacha dalet, it's not oversized. It's not oversized anymore. That's important. So it changes. And chalula means it's a keli sholing. It's outside. It's not in a house. What did we say, my friends? That a keli is not choitzeitz. Kol shuhu keneged hazayis b'tachlei. But we do say that the inner space is separate. V'chol mashu b'toicha tor. El keneged atuma. Chol she'en keneged atuma toicha tor. Chois atuma b'toicha. Then we say, inside of it, it is an oil. Inside of it, everything inside of it is not. And now we also say, since the rule that kalim are not choitzeitz, the chol shegeneged atumah l'mayla gabo oilamato tachtea becomes tamei. Hoysa gavoy mino aretz tefach. Hoysa gavoy mino aretz tefach, and tumas underneath it, or tumas on top of it. So far, I go back. It's an oversized kaves. Now, hoisig v'emaras tefach and tumas underneath it or on top of it. So kol shetachtel tomei, b'chol shal gabat tomei, avo kol shebatoicha tor. But again, when we say kol shebatoicha tor, it doesn't mean anywhere in it. If something in it is directly above or directly below, that will become tomei. But if the tum is inside of it, hakol tomei, kol ma shebatoicha v'kol shetachtel v'chol shelamayla gabo. Because I can't live here, main chitzim come should be yarno. If it's no longer a keli, which is to the advantage over here, either like we mentioned, either because it was broken and you only fixed it with kash, or let's skip the parentheses. That's the whole issue. When the Rambam writes, which would mean that until now it was not habab mida, doesn't fit with everything. Many people don't even have these words. Ukazai is when I make nason tachtehom. Since it's not a keli, it is choitzitz. Okay? Which would mean that until now we were speaking about a keli, just certain nuances will be problematic. But since it's not a keli, it's choitzitz, which is great. So only connect the azlem tamei, or if the tumah is on top of it, only connect the alkiya tamei. V'toicha ain't tamei, and if the tumah is in it, it only remains in it. Again, this broken kaveres, this non-keli kaveres, guys. Now it's basically we're just applying the same rules we learned until now, and the tumah is underneath it. So only tachtel b'vat tamei. If the tumah is in it, only toicha b'vat tamei. If it's on top of it, only kirin tamei. Farvas, because we already said meaning it's not tamei ka'elu chashuv. Like a kalim and different chaitzes. Halacha 5. Guys, here we go. Now, you know what we're speaking about? We're speaking about a kaveres, Aaron, that has no cover. It's standing on the bottom and it's open. I mean, something in it is also under the roof. The yosheves al shulel, but it's not in a house, it's in an outdoor lavira. If the tumah is underneath it, or if the tumah is on top of it, it cannot be contained in it. It's open. But if it was above the ground of tefach, or if it was covered, or it's a kaveres without a cover, but you turned it upside down. So when you turned it upside down, the opening is now closed with the earth. and tumas underneath it, or tumas inside of it, or tumas on top of it. Now, hakol tame, and therefore kol shebeteicha, v'chol shetachtel, and v'chol shal gaba, imhoisa tuma lamata, because shakli hamayil maybe asatuma ve'eno chaitzes kamei shebiyarnu, and therefore imhoisa pechusa upakuka bekasha. Now apply the same rule if you're gonna make ois keli to this kaveris, you're gonna nullify its status of a keli, or it's a keli hababa midah. And the tuma tachteha oibetoich al gaba, since it doesn't have a din of a keli, so then tuma bekas only the oilers of bekas v'yeredus only. But the imoisa gavay tefach, then it stops its chaytzitz. Tuma tachteha without tamei. Hoisa tuma beteicha oil gaba, again it's chaytzitz. Connect the adlikia tamei and the kelim tachteha toinu mepneishi oil vechaytzitzes. And the final halacha in this chapter, halacha vav. Now let's speak about a behemoth, an animal. The example we're giving is a gomel. So you have a gomel shu oimed ba'aver. A gomel is standing outside, and there's tuma underneath it. So, guys, what the beauty is, we learned about Adam and Kalim. Now we're going to have a little bit about a behemoth. So we say like this, that the gomel, right? The gomel itself is going to be choitzetz, right? Only Kali and only Adam have an issue with not being chaytzitz. That's chaytzitz. So therefore, the kalim that are on top of it are tohidim. Or the opposite. If there's some tummy on top of the camel, kalim shetachtov, tohidim. It's chaytzitz. If it's crouching, which means there isn't a tefach between the ground and the body and the stomach, the belly of the gomel. So now you have the rule of bekas v'ayla, bekas v'yeredus. It can't be chaytzitz because that was the principle we learned. You have to have a pesach tefach. Now, if the camel is standing on tumam, you don't have a tefach, or if it's right on top of the leg of the animal, you need to use the physical opening under the gomel for you to have the din of, there's an oil, there's a tefach, and it's chaytzitz. That even though we mentioned that if you and a mace are under a gomel, the behemoth serves as an oil, but since a nazir who would become tamei doesn't bring the karbanos, the Rambam already mentioned, that's a raya to the Rambam that this type of oil must only be medrabanan. Because I want to make tachas hagomel or tachas hamita. See again, kalim being made as an oil. So what was the fart of chayt? That kalim are not chaytzitz, but they create not an oil, a kalim. So since we learned in the Zerus, even though but the Nazir cannot stop his count, because what's the downside? The downside is that if he has to practice Dinei Tuma, then he has to be Megaleach on the seventh day. How can he be Megaleach when a Nazir may not shave? He can only do it if he's takatomic. Is the Haraya that Rambam uses this, that's only Yotun Midrabanan. Or from Kalim, which was the topic of the last two chapters. Amazing. That's very important. So divrei soifrim, we mentioned this just a while back, doesn't always mean from the Rambam midrabanan. Some of it can be divrei Kabbalah, which means halacha l'Moshe Sinai. But since it's not written in the Torah, it's called not as severe. And therefore, and therefore, as we already mentioned before. And today's final chapter, the 20th chapter. Now we're moving on, and it's going to be a more general chapter, a lot simpler without all these nuances. And here will be the rule that there's shloisha devarim betzilim ba'oil hametz. It's going to be summit puzzle, if you remember. So because of Hashem's rule that a klei cheres only, klei cheres is ceramic, that it only becomes tummy, acquires tummy. Mi avidoi v'toichoi. The Torah writes that explicitly. If you have a klei cheres that has a summit puzzle, that means it's tightly fastened. So therefore, it's physically, the oil doesn't go into it. The tumah does not go into it. It doesn't become tumah with tumah oil. And we also learned, by the way, that if you move it, since you also move the inside space, it's as if you touch the inside space, it will become tumah. But if it's only tumas oil, summit puzzle is matzel from tumas oil. We're going to learn how sometimes an oil is matzel. I know we have to go back to dinam that we learned before. And bolua. Bolua is matzel. Just an example of bolua. If something is swallowed in a living being. Lamashal, the example that Chazal gives, a dog ate up a ring. And then the dog walked into a house in which there is a mace. Since it's balua inside, now the din of balua has to be inside a living being. If it's balua inside a living being, adam or behema, it does not acquire tumah. These are the three things that could be matzel. That's going to be the topic of the 20th chapter. 20 chapter has 8 halachas. Yidden put on a new hat. It's a lot simpler. Now we're learning the basics. Halacha out. Number one, Samit Puzzle, a tightly fastened clay cheres. Whenever you read Samit Puzzle, remember we're only speaking about ceramic, which is the unique din. Number one, clay cheres only becomes tummy on the level of addition. You don't have a clay tuma. The Rambam already said on the af. Number two, it can only acquire tuma from the migaboy. I'm sorry, only mitoichai, and not from the outside. Number two, oiholim, as we'll see. And number three, beluyim. Beluyim means if something is swallowed. Now says the Rambam that it goes habeluyim. Both matzilim alatohoidim shelo yistamu, like we mentioned the example of the ring that was tummy. Also in the other direction, if something is tummy but it's now swallowed in a living being, it will not impart. In other words, the beluyim is in both ways. But a summit puzzle, my friends, only means, like we said, if there's tummy in the house, in the room, and you bring in azah ceramic that's tightly sealed, it saves that which is in it from becoming tummy. Well, what happens if you have a kazais and a mace in a summit in a clay cheres? Even though it's sealed, it doesn't prevent the tumor from leaving. Same thing with oil. What we did learn in the past 2 chapters, we keep on mentioning it, that there's differences. Generally, an oil within an oil, if the tumah is in the inner oil, it's as if it's in the outer oil. When do we say that oil is matzel from tumas oil? It's only in the one direction. If tumah is b'taychabayis, so if tumah lotzeis, why would the tumah have to be brought under the oil? Sometimes we will consider the area under the oil as a separate, following many other rules. Okay. They only prevent that which is underneath it from it acquiring. But if there is tumah under the oil, in the oil, if there is tumah in the tzamid puzzle under a house, doesn't prevent it from it contaminating the others, because it does. It will impart tumah. Case that, for example, if the bais is tummy, then we say, Taka, if the tumah is in the house, not in the keli, if there's another real oil, now guys, we also have to remember that if one oil is open to the other oil with peseach tefach, then the tumah will travel, but there's a possibility that since the tumah is in the outer house and you are now in inside an oil, all of the kelim in it can become tahoidim. But if the kazais v'names is in a keli, and even though a keli meaning klecheres, and even though you tightly fastened it, and you bring it into a house, it doesn't prevent the tumor from leaving. And now that it's leaving, it's under the roof of the house. Habayis tamei. And are also tamei. That's gavaldik, right? Soif tumalatzis. Halacha base. In contrast, this third category, entities that are swallowed, it's a two-way salvation. That sounds so azoi. Double salvation. For example, if you have a kelev that ate up a psar hameis, I want you to know that the Rambam is going to tell you in a moment, if God forbid such a thing were to happen, there is a point where halachically we say the psar hameis is already digested, just to know that. And therefore, even if it's removed from, it's not matame anymore. We're speaking about that halachically, if you were to take it out as is from the... It's still a kazais min hameis. Still, the fact that it's swallowed in a living creature, the house is tahar. Habai is tahar. And in the other direction, the dog swallowed the ring, or a person that swallowed the ring, and they entered an oil where there's a mace. You know what's amazing? If I enter an oil a mace, I become tummy. But the ring in me does not. That's the din of Beluyim. This din of Beluyim is that any living creature, Matzilin, as long as they're living, the moment they pass on by a person, by a behema, but they die, then that's in their insides. No, it's not like it's Belua. It's not like it's Belua. And in both directions. So if it ate it up and it died within 24 hours by all creatures, or within 72 hours by a dog, still considered mace, it's going to impart to one. Now, what does death mean? Death means death. What happens if you shechted roiv echad ba'oif? Halachically, it's called geshachted, or roiv shnayim ba'behema, and they're still jumping around. Here, they're considered dead already. The ein matzilin in neither direction. Alakem ha'beloyim, v'loymoinim esatuma shebatech mayem shaloi tatame. Halacha for the kama tisha atuma be'yam. You're right. So once they are dead, it's not belua. But hold on, like we mentioned, once something is digested, at some point, it's no longer considered its original entity. So the Torah is telling us some laws of nature. That it goes like this: dog is different from all other creatures, and we also learned that. In just to give you here, it does follow the same rules. What did we learn? We learned, whether it was on Shabbos or on Brachas, that normally I'm not allowed to feed animals on Shabbos. The only exception is if I own it. What is an exception to that? A dog. Dog is considered the only creature that it doesn't have enough food in nature. And because of that, this is connected. Hashem made it that a dog needs 72 hours to digest food. That's a blessing to the dog. So even if it doesn't have food right now, there's still food giving it nutrients a long time after it ate. So that's the rule. So a kelev, prior to a full 72 hours, the food that it ate is still considered original food. And if it ate a kazais min ames, it's called kazais min ames. And all other chayis, 24 hours. Now, but if you have a zayd that swallowed the tinoi, God forbid, and it what happens if an animal ate something and within 24 hours it's already exiting the other side? It's no longer considered the original. When are we saying that within 24 hours it's still considered the original? If it's still inside the animal's intestines. You understand? So therefore, if you shach the day, if you kill that ze'ev, and the ze'ev is in the house, everything in the house is tummy. But once it exited derech re'i, then it's no longer considered the original. But 1 second, that's only on the meat. But the bones are different. Bones never get digested. So even if the bones exited the animal, if you have enough bone, like even a kisoida matama b'mago b'maso. If you have roiv binyan, roiv atzomas, it's going to be matama even boiled. That will continue. Atzomas b'tumas halacha 5. Ein abulim mitzalam elam. This rule of beloim has only been nefesh achaya, only in a living being, like we said. But the moment something is swallowed in the utensil, if something is inside a stone, they are not saved. For example, kush shenivla lotechatzinu shel matechas, a spindle. Right, so he's speaking about different kalim that they were made from the outside. You have like a piece of wood, and then at the tip you have a nail, a hook, a nail. Certain kalim that it was common that you could easily insert one part inside of it, or a malamed, something that people use to goad animals. Right, it has a little spit, it has a little metal keli, and it got shoved in. Or if you have a levena, somehow when the guy was making bricks, the guy that was wearing a ring, his ring fell off, and now the ring is in the brick. Point is that just a keli that's inside a keli. And this went into the oil mace, even though there's no exit. It's that little hook is stuck in there. Nitmo afapisha ain't need him, even though they're completely covered. Because she'ain habeloyim ba'kelim atzilim ella. If you have a tzamid pasel and a klei cheres, that's something else. That's not called nivla. That's called tzamid pasel. Chei machadoy tabas. So they used to have certain coverings to an oven. He's giving you, it's practical. It could happen that there could be a keli that got stuck in it. And the Tanarus Tami Be'elameis, then we say, even that keli that's stuck in the outer cover, it's part of the Tanner, it becomes Tami. Now, a Tanner is normally made out of ceramic. That's what we're talking about. So if it's like a seal, Then the kalim that are not inside the airspace, they are stuck inside the wall of, inside the covering of, they will also be safe. If you have a jug, again, I was speaking about earthenware jugs only, that if it's surrounded with a tight seal, there's a cover. Wow. Mitzida means not by the opening. And the side, then they're tummy. Here again we say, if they cannot be seen from the mamash, then they're tohidin. But if they enter even the inner airspace, they become tame because it's not bottle. That's the point. In other words, a keli doesn't make bulua. If in the prior cases we say it's considered bottle. If you can see it, it's not bottle. As will be explained. Very good. That's why the din of tzamid pasal does not apply over here. Now, if it could be seen, sometimes you have a needle. That's the great example, and the needle is protruding. Right, it's stuck in the cover, Aaron, and the needle is almost breaking through the inner part. So if you would be standing inside of it, you would see it, but it's not opened yet. So now we say it's considered bottle, and that's why they are tohid. Halacha 6. Kol habaluyim bekarkiyos shel bayis. All kalim that are in the ground in a house. Hareim temelim ve'enu tzala. Shekarka ha'oyel komoyu ad hatohaim. It's amazing. The moment you have a din that something in the house is tummy from tumas oil, since we are saying that beluyim is only in a living being, don't think that if something is buried on the ground, it's saved. It's not saved. It goes all the way down to the time. Masha ain't kain in the walls, as we'll explain. For example, Abayis, and you have kalim that are dug underground, even if they are 100 amas underground, boomba tameim. However, another detail, if where you dug this hole underground, it's actually a cavity in the ground. A cavity in the ground means there's a tefach by a tefach by a tefach. Why? Think about it. A bomba kasha. If you have 2 stories and you have a tomb on the top story, we don't say that underneath it's tamei because it's a house on a house. Oh, and not belua bakarka. The person divided the house with a partition. Now, don't think about a partition as a wall. You made like a 2-story house. You made a partition, and underneath the bottom partition, you have a tefach. Here we say it does go up because of my friends. Soif tumalatzes. But if the tumah was on top of this little fake floor that you made, that underneath it there was a tefach or more. Because, like we said, if tumah is on the second story, we don't say that the bottom story is considered tummy. Now, when there's tumah in a proper bottom story, the top story also doesn't become tummy. Because if I want to remove the tumah, I don't have to go through the aliyah. This little floor, anything underneath it will end up coming out into the house. So it goes up. Now it's considered buried in the ground. And the point is that aretz does not create this heter of beluyin. So everything underneath this ground will become tamei. How great. Now we're gonna go into a drain. Bib. Imagine the fancy people then that already had drains going under the house. So if it has a size of a Pesach Tefach and some of it is opened outside the house, also Pesach Tefach and Tumas in it, that's great. We can't say Soif Tumalot, says Yaakov, because you can take it out from the drain. Habayis start. Hoisa Tuma Babayis, also the other direction. So everything in the drain is start. Hoi by Pesach Tefach. So it's considered a separate environment, but The exit doesn't have the size of a tefach, and tuma's inside it. Now everything in the house is tamei. Why? Soif tuma lotzeis. Beautiful. If tuma's in the house, everything is in tar. Why? Because since it has in there a size of a tefach, we only say soif tuma lotzeis. We don't say soif tuma likonis. She'ein darka tuma likonis. But aim by Pesach Tefach. The aim is Yosei Pesach Tefach. If the tumah is in the house, Habayis tummy, Kilo B'tech Habayis. If it's inside the drain, everything in the house is tummy. Tumah Habayis, Kol Masha B'tech Tummy. All going back to this rule because Kalim Tumunim Bakarka. The Karka Habayis Kamoyu Aratoim. Beluim doesn't go. There's no head to the Beluim. And the final halacha 8. Shtei Chaviyos. If you have 2 jugs, Lachatzi Zayis B'Chalecha, then each one only contains a half a Zayis. Guys, this is going to blow your mind. And each one is Samit Pasel. Now, let me just go away out and think about this. It was worth to live just for this halacha. So we said that a Samit Pasel doesn't prevent a tumah from leaving. So understand what's happening. You have 2 ceramics. They're both sealed. Each one has a half a kazayis. Everything in the house is tummy. Why? Because the oil is over both. But nothing indeed will be tummy. Because the half a zayis of this one that bounces to the roof stops by the seal. So each one has a half, and they're both in the house. So they remain taut. It's amazing. They cause everything else to be problematic, but they stay taut. So why is the house tummy? Babayis tummy because the house has a kazayis. Because we said the ain't Samit Pasal lit tumah. Samit Pasal doesn't stop tumah from going out. But they don't acquire tumah because of the house, because they're compassed on pass. Now, what happens if one of them was open? That one is tumah, because if it's not sealed, the tumah goes into it. The other one remains taut. Guys, you have an inner room, an outer room, and the house. You get it? It's like 3. The only way to go from the innermost one is to go through the middle one, to go to the outer one. The outer one we're going to call either the outer or the house. And a half a zayis is in the innermost one, a half a zayis in the outermost one. Guys, let's go to Seif Tumah Lotzes. So let me ask you, how are you going to remove the tumah from the innermost one? You're going to go through the outermost one. So if you have a kazayis either in the middle or in the middle, and one in the outer one is tamei, and the inner and the middle one are tohidim. Now, guys, remember one thing: if there are doors that are opened a tefach, the tumah is going to go back in. We're speaking about you don't have that opening, and what we learned today is that even you don't remember the closet, even if there isn't a tefach opening, since when the tumah will be removed, that's the only way it can be removed. So it's as if it was removed. Now, and a half a zayis in them soy. So at least the innermost one is taught. But here, the middle one and the outer one are tamei, because the inner one is going to have in it, the middle one will have from the inner one. Wow.